These jugs remind me of my granddad. As a young child, I used to visit him every Sunday, and he used to say, "What would you like, Jan?" And I'd say, "Some flowers, please, Grandad." He'd take me up his garden, and he'd say, "You can have as many as you could carry." And I'd put my arms together, and he'd fill my arms with cut roses that used to smell absolutely delightful, and they were a beautiful pink. Every Sunday, I brought them home. And one day I went to see him and he said, "I got something for you." I said, "Oh, more roses, Grandad." He said, "No, something to put them in." And he gave me these old grey vases and he said, "I've bought them from the junk shop. Hope you like them." And I loved them. They're the only things that I've got left, as he's been gone, 30 odd years. But they sit on my kitchen windowsill and I too fill them up with flowers. And I remember him as if it was yesterday.
This is the number plate of what was my first car for all intents and purposes. It wasn't actually mine. My sister-in-law used to let me drive her old Rover 200, and it was called Denty, sort of to suit its personality. It had a lot of dents in it. But I mean, that was one of the reasons why I loved it, and it sort of didn't really matter if I put another dent in it. I grew quite attached to the car because I had a lot of fun times with my friends in it, and I had sort of freedom for the first time in my life when I passed my driving test. It was a really good time. And when I left for uni, I couldn't drive Denty anymore, but it came to the point where Denty wasn't going to last very much longer, and my sister-in-law needed a new car, so they got Denty scrapped. And on my 20th birthday, my brother sent me the front number plate as kind of a sick joke. But to be honest with you, I loved it. I was sad, but I loved it.
This old Behringer watch is one of the very few things I have left from my dad, who unfortunately passed when I was very, very young. I think I was about 6, 7 years old. So at that age, you can't really remember too much about such an important family member as your dad at that age. So I remember when I was 18 years old, I remember I kept telling my parents and saying I don't have enough to remember my dad by, and it was my mum and my stepdad. And they decided one day when I was 18 to just pass over this watch, and it meant a lot to me because I always remember my dad wearing this, and it's bizarre that I only remember sort of insignificant, pathetic, minute little things. For example, the sad thing is I don't remember his voice, but I do remember, say, the chain that he wore, the watch that he wore, and bizarrely the way that he smelled. And one of the key things, and this might sound weird, is that the leather of this watch still strangely smells slightly of his aftershave. I've always had a very strong sense of smell, but it always makes emotions flood back whenever I smell it. Not that you should smell a watch, but it really does fill me with quite a lot of emotion, this watch, and it's definitely something I could never part with. Even though it doesn't fit anymore, doesn't work anymore, I'm never going to get rid of it.
Yes, reflecting back to my youth in the 60s, as can be seen in the photo, I'm proudly holding my dad's cigarette case, given to me by my mother after his death in 1988. The case was given to him Christmas 1947. Inside there's an engraved message of my mum to my dad, this he always treasured. The case has further history kept inside of photos, texts and a handwritten message to my dad from my mother. I have now passed it down to my daughter Hayley so that she can remember her granddad in years to come.
I don't remember a time without my rocking horse. Like, as far as I can remember, it's always been there. My grandpa made it for me soon after I was born, and he also made one for my cousin. So his first two grandchildren from each of his children he made one for, as well as his wife, so my grandma. So they're three in total, and I have one of three. All are very different, both in looks and in meaning. Sadly, my grandpa passed away 2 years ago, so the rocking horse is extra special to me now. It's a strong connection that I had with him, as well as holding lots of memories for me. And knowing that he made it for me rather than my brother or sister makes it extra special. It was mine, no one else's. I remember him coming round and sitting me on it, and he'd rock it backwards and forwards, and I'd sit there and hold on to him, and he'd say, "Worry, Neddy," and he'd tell me about how when he was a schoolboy, he'd go to school on a horse and a cart, and the horse was called Bobtail, and he'd turn the horse round after he'd got off, and he'd say, "Back home now," and the horse would go back home. The rocking horse brings back lots of memories of my grandpa, and I'll always remember the story he'd tell me about going to school on the horse. Obviously, although I never went to school on a horse, I never did anything on that rocking horse, really. Whenever I look at it, I just remember sitting on it as a little girl, looking up at my grandpa and being fascinated by everything I said. When I look at it, I still think of him now.
Okay, this story begins with my necklace, which was bought for me by my wonderful man, who brought it to me in our first few months of us going out together. And when he gave it to me, he said, "This is your birthstone, and when I take you to Turkey, I shall get you the real thing." So the following year, he took me on a cruise, and we went to a place after Greece, Athens in Greece. We went to a place called Kuşadası in Turkey, and he took me to a shop that he already knew of, and we were looking at the jewellery, and I didn't know about a ring or a bracelet or a necklace. I wasn't sure what he had in mind. But he asked me to look at the jewellery, and he said, "Is there anything there that you like?" And I did see a ring with a ruby in it, which was beautiful. And I said, "Well, I'm really drawn to that. That's lovely." So he said, "Let's go inside and have a look." So we went inside, and I tried it on, and it just was so beautiful. I think it was made for me, or I for it. And he asked me if I really liked it, and I said, yeah, I did. But I tried to get him not to buy it there and then because I felt a little bit embarrassed, and I didn't want to say, yes, I would like it. So we left the shop and walked along the road hand in hand, and he said to me, "Do you really like that ring?" And I said, yeah, I do. I love it. And he said, "Well, I'm going to go back and get it for you if you'll let it mean something." So I said, "What do you mean?" So he said, "Well, I'll buy it for you as an engagement ring." So I said, okay. And he left me at a bus shelter, and he went back towards the shop, clambering and falling over a bike that was parked outside. Went into the shop, was gone for about 10-15 minutes, and then he came out with that beautiful ring, and he showed it to me in the box, and I looked at it and just melted. And then he closed the box. He said, "You're not having it now." And we went back to the ship, and I thought maybe he'll give it to me in the room, and we had a couple of drinks in our room, and he still didn't give me the ring. And then we had a little sleep, and when I woke up, he still didn't give me the ring. And I thought, maybe he's not even going to give it to me till we get back to England. So we got showered and everything. We went out that night. It was a formal evening where we get dressed up, and we got quite dressed up. And we went downstairs, and then we went into the restaurant, and Barry was dressed in his bow tie and his sun and moon waistcoat, and I had on a black cocktail evening dress. Oh dear. And he got down on one knee in front of about 200 people or more, and he proposed. Oh, sorry. He asked me to marry him. I said I'd love to. And he put the ring on my finger. We drank some pink fizz. I had a wonderful, memorable evening.
So, since before I can really remember, I've had Lucky, my used to be Dalmatian. He did actually have spots. He had a Lucky horseshoe on his back of spots, which has now disappeared due to the amount of cuddles that he has received over the years. Even though I will be turning the tender age of 27 this year, I have no shame in saying that I take him to bed every night, and he is my little comfort, and I look at it as whenever and wherever I am, I know that I'm at home if I've got him underneath my head as I go to sleep. So going from living with my parents to everything that I knew, being in the same place, to moving away to what seems like a foreign world, which is actually just Herne Bay, but having my little puppy just snuggled up with me makes me feel like I'm at home, and now it is my home and I'm settled, and the puppy helped a lot. So I love my puppy. I love Lucky very much, even though everyone calls him Skanky and they don't like to touch him. He's mine.
In the photograph, you'll see several objects that I'm holding, along with a rather scruffy looking Jack Russell, which we rescued. This is Bandit, sort of constant companion who ends up going wherever I do. However, the two objects that I'd like to show you are two Chinese astrological figures, one of a snake, one of an ox, which are very personal to me. They're part of a collection that's come from all over the world, from China, from Japan, from the US and Europe. The snake and the ox are Catherine and I's Chinese signs, and I knew nothing about Chinese astrology until I met Catherine. She showed me the importance of these animals, and it turns out that we are very compatible, or so she says. Anyway, they mean a lot to me. They were really nice to collect and give to her as a collection. So, as far as I'm concerned, they're two of the most important things that I have at the moment.
So what I'm holding is some pictures that I was sent by my sister that had appeared in the local paper in Ipswich where I used to live, and they brought back quite a few memories, as the pictures are of places that I lived. The house I lived in was behind the shop, which was opposite a pub, which is still there. There is, you reminded me of the lady that used to live down the road, that you could buy pickling vinegar, and you used to have to take your own bottles and get the pickling vinegar, and it was my job when I was about 10 to go and take the bottles and bring all the pickling vinegar back for my mum. Also, they showed pictures of a row of shops where I had a Saturday job in the laundrette. I then went across, and when I finished school, I went to work at the little supermarket, and then I went on to work at the bakery, which was the factory bakery, finishing off wedding cakes and birthday cakes and things like that. I then married and moved down to Kent, and that was over 40 years ago. This was quite interesting to me, and I sent an email back to the paper, which was printed some weeks later in another edition.
In this image, I'm holding a monocular, which is the earliest memorable childhood present I've received from my granddad. He got it for me because I always used to stay around his house with my brother, and I always used to be awake early, which is when he would take Buzz, his dog, out for walks. So he'd let me come with him whilst my brother and Nan would be asleep back home. And one morning, whilst on one of the dog walks, there were all these pheasants, rabbits, and other small animals. However, I couldn't see because I was too short and I was far away. So, as my granddad already had a binocular, he let me his to see through to look at all the animals, and he told me about them all. The following week, when I came back to his house, we went to the boot fair on a Sunday. I distinctly remember seeing a similar monocular to the one he had, and I begged him to buy it for me for the next dog walk. Needless to say, he brought it for me, and I've had it ever since.